an economic and cosmic principle that guided their lives. It has been suggested that the urgently needed radical social transformation could occur by rediscovering and revitalizing Maat. Dr. Maulana Karenga, Dr. Jacob Carruthers have been leading the bandwagon in that regard. Making Maat once again an organizing principle for the African world community. Offered here will be some insights into some of the neuropsychological processes involved in value judgment in ethical acts and how different cultures profoundly influence those processes. Because what we see, the element that's missing in all our social theories is a biological basis, a neurological basis. Every single social theory takes as granted, as given, our biology, but they don't look at how critical that is in terms of epistemology, in terms of axiology, in terms of ontology, the nature of a person, what is personal being. Every single social theory has missed that crucial link, but in Kemet, that was integrated in their social theories, and Maat was their organizing principle. The most pervasive transcultural issue facing humanity today, particularly the world African community, is the erosion, the disintegration, the radical anti-life transformation of our moral ecology. And we find that has a lot to do with education. One of our most brilliant religious political philosophers, Maria Stewart, some years ago, offered a compelling critique on this state of affairs and some timely advice as well on how to meet the challenge. Maria Stewart said, "Where is the woman who would blush at vulgarity? Did not the daughters of our land, Africa, possess a delicacy of manners combined with gentleness and dignity? Did not their pure minds hold vice in abhorrence and contempt? Did not they frown when their ears were polluted with vile accents? Would not their influence become powerful?" And she said, "Where is the youth who has written upon his or hers manly brow a thirst for pure knowledge, whose ambitious mind soars above trifles and longs for the time when he or she can plead the cause of his people? Have the sons of Africa no souls? Shall the chains of ignorance forever confine them? It is of no use for us to boast that we sprung from this learned and enlightened nation, Africa. For this day a thick mist of moral gloom hangs over millions of our race. Our condition has been low for hundreds of years and will continue to be so unless by pure piety and virtue we strive again to regain that which we lost. Oh, then turn your attention to knowledge and improvement, for knowledge is power, and eloquently plead the cause of virtue and the pure principles of morality." Now, that's current. What's so compelling about that is that she was a contemporary of David Walker. She made that in 1831 in a series of speeches. And that is as current today as it was then. Maria Stewart offered prescriptions as well as a critical social critique on economics, feminism, morality, politics, and other social issues. She said, along with other people such as Harold Cruz, which in his book Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, only when the American Negro creates an ethnic group social and cultural philosophy will he or she be able to deal effectively with this dilemma in real terms. Cruz was very pessimistic in his book. Malcolm X offered another commentary that I think is more optimistic when he said, we, black people, can come up with a new philosophy. We can come up with a philosophy that nobody has heard yet. We can invent a society, a social system, an economic system, a political system that is different from anything that exists or has ever existed. Cornel West, Department of African Studies at Princeton University, in his book, Prophecy, Deliverance, in Afro-American Revolutionary Christianity, outlines how African critical thought must accomplish these goals. And I just want to share a few central points of his outline. The first thing is that we have to define who and what is a human being in the first place from an African perspective. So we have the question of self-identity. Then we also have to deal with the political struggle in order to get control over the institutions that regulate our people's lives and offer solutions. Then he outlines 5 tasks that can accomplish those goals. The first task, he says, which goes along with what Cruz has said and others, Bobby Wright, a whole host of people, is to put forward an overarching interpretive framework to solve our problems. Then that framework has to speak to the relationship between Africans, American, and European elements of this entire social experience. Then he said the second task, we have to engage in a historical, genealogical critique of white supremacy. We have to understand what is the social dynamic that we live in today. And the third task is we have to provide a critique of the second task of white supremacy. And then he says that there's 4 major critiques. Somewhere our people fall into one of these 4 lines, that the extensionists who laud the uniqueness of African American culture and personality, the assimilationists who just consider African American cultural tradition to be pathological. Then you have the marginalists who posit that the African American cultural tradition is restrictive, constraining, and confining. And then you have the humanists who extol the distinctives of African American culture and personality. Then he offers as his 4th task, which I have problems with, is that African American religious thought is to present a dialogical encounter between African American Christian thought and progressive Marxist social analysis. I think, first off, he makes the assumption that African American Christian thought is the only African American religious thought there is. So he's given primacy to that. So I would disagree with him on that. Then the last task, he says, is to provide for a religious philosophy. To provide for a political prescription, you have to have a religious philosophy. But again, he fails to outline the need for a biosocial critique. And he even criticizes black theologians, as that they're always talking about we're going to ameliorate our problems, but they never talk about how they're going to do it and what it's going to amount to. And he goes on to say that there is a lack of a clear-cut social theory which prevents the emergence of any substantive political program for social vision. He needs to read Diop. I think he can be enlightened on that, because there is an overarching framework which Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said there can be no African history, no social science without an African worldview. Maulana Karenga has said, and he can say it much better himself, but I do want to repeat one statement, is that we dare to create, pose, and put in place an African paradigm both for our liberation and even higher levels of human life. I feel, as Maulana and Jake and others, that Ma'at can be that overarching interpretive framework, that social theory that brings into coherence a lot of our thoughts historically. But I go a step further. I argue that we need a revolutionary, revitalized Mahdian perspective and praxis. Specifically, we need a Mahdian perspective and praxis that is right for this historical epoch. Because you see, even in Kemet, Ma'at evolved. It was not the same in the old kingdom as it was in the new kingdom. Okay? It must be revolutionary in that it must be genuine, creative, and open to change and self-critical. It must provide a synoptic vision to engage more of us in the struggle for a normative future of peace and harmony, happiness and prosperity, compassion and integrity, virtuousness, fairness, and beauty. It must be revolutionary because we understand it is very risky business to summon up to recover powerful symbolism and ideas out of our distal past uncritically. The symbol users, that means everyone, particularly our artists, must have garnered as best as possible an authentic, holistic interpretation of those symbols and ideas. 2, be very self-conscious of their choices and applications. And 3, be fully aware of how their social experience is both similar and dissimilar from that of ancient Kemet. Concerning the last point, I submit that Ma'at is not wholly other, quote, that is totally anterior to the African American social experience, that we would not be, as some of our assimilationist, neoconservative, and regressive critics say that we're doing, appropriating an alien culture. I argue that a Maatian perspective and practice is already implicitly deeply embedded within the moral ecology of the historical African American experience, and that it was never lost. From the heart of many of our greatest minds, from David Walker to Fannie Lou Hamer, from Benjamin Banneker to Zora Neale Hurston, from Sojourner Truth to John Coltrane, James Weldon Johnson to Ida B. Wells, Malcolm X to Maria Stewart, to Martin Delaney, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, Du Bois, Elijah Muhammad, Paul Robeson, and a constellation of others, including many of you in this room, can hear reverberating echoes of the Sabiyat, of Hatotep, Menakare, the eloquent peasant, that when we look at their works from a Maatian perspective, we see Maat lives in their works. The problem is that its radiance is scattered, it's unfocused, it's incoherent, like light from the day star. We must gather these individual rays and pump them up, make them continuously reflect back and forth on each other and on themselves, becoming coherent like laser light, a highly focused, powerful single beam of light. I argue that it must be a revitalized Ma'at perspective and practice. While the essence of Ma'at was unchanging, its expression reflected the changing socio-political dynamic of different dynastic periods. Our society